When we talk about financial terms of any kind, we're almost hesitant to ask the basics because we feel like somehow we're supposed to know all of these different terms. So I'm going to take us all the way back to the very, very basic for today's conversation, which is what is a tax incentive?
Sure. Tax incentives are credits and deductions that are put into legislation in the actual IRS code to help incentivize certain actions. So, in particular, the incentives that I specialize in are incentives around energy efficiency, building sciences, real estate, or renewable property.
And you were mentioning that you're specifically kind of in that energy space. For someone who's not deep in the space, how big or what is the scale of that industry when we're talking about tax incentives? It could be specific to the US or maybe North America, but just for us to wrap our brains around as to how big of a market opportunity that really is.
Sure. So that's a great question. There are so many tax incentives that are available. If you're familiar, the Inflation Reduction Act was passed in 2022, and it enhanced a whole lot of incentives centered around energy and real estate. They estimate that because of the Inflation Reduction Act, which is in place for another about 10 years, they expect there to be about $400 billion of
Wow.
tax savings just around the energy efficiency space. There's other tax incentives available for many other things, but in specific, that bill alone is quite a bit of value to go back into the US economy.
Who are your customers on the day to day? Is it more on the corporate side? Is it individuals? What does that look like?
Sure. So TaxTaker is a tax consulting firm. So we partner with CPAs to help them with some of these very niche tax incentives. I'm the vice president of energy incentives, and I'm actually a professional engineer by background. So, not a financial person. And the reason why that makes sense is because some of these incentives are very engineering technical in nature. So, I provide all of that support so that a CPA can then put that on the return and understand exactly what's going on from the industry's side of things, explaining how this renewable property works or the energy efficiency property works, and then can easily translate that for a tax return. The types of clients that I work with are all sizes. So we work with some big corporations who have maybe large ESG goals, and so that they can tie these incentives in with those. But even small companies or business owners who want to implement an energy efficient project, maybe install renewable property, we can help those folks as well. And as you can imagine, for a smaller business owner, some of these incentives can be really impactful.
Mentioned that your organization includes both what I think more the classic role that I would picture more those accountants, but then you also have folks like yourself who are engineers and you guys come together and you're able to explore state and federal level tax incentives, correct? What does that look like in your day to day then?
Yeah, so we do a ton of education and consulting upfront during projects. What that looks like is understanding the scope. Maybe somebody has an idea of what they want to implement and want to know what's available. So we educate, again, corporations, maybe small business owners, even design teams or contractors who are interested in helping their clients pursue some of these incentives. Um, Once we educate, then we can help them understand, okay, what value is available? How can we help you while you design and construct this project? And then at the back end, that's when we do the majority of our work to actually calculate the tax deduction, finalize that, and then prepare the paperwork. So it's a mix between actual doing the work and then consulting with all sorts of parties to help them understand even what's available, what incentives might even play together, like what federal incentives and state incentives could you take on the same project.
I love that collaborative approach, and I'd imagine that has such a positive impact. When we are talking about change management, certainly there are two approaches that we can take, and this is more at a psychological level, I think, than necessarily just business, but you can take a carrot or you can take a stick approach. And so for the carrot, it's really encouraging behavior by rewarding it. And then the stick is either encouraging specific behavior to avoid a penalty or penalizing bad behavior. So you have a little bit of those two. With your work, it's definitely on that carrot side, which I love, and I think is maybe part of the narrative that's been missing when we're talking about having a positive environmental impact. So, what Like, what advantages do you think that it come with having that positive, that carrot approach? And then are there any limitations or bottlenecks that you also experience as part of that approach?
Yeah, that's a great question, Lauren. So, what I see being great about the incentive space is that we are helping building owners, companies, organizations actually implement these projects. What may have been a budget hurdle before, maybe they had a wish list that just exceeded what they can actually
Mhm.
afford. These incentives can make those projects possible. So, understanding what's available and being able to pursue them may mean including more energy efficient equipment into their project that they originally wanted, but maybe couldn't have if they weren't going to look at these incentives. And so I see that as a better needle mover of getting folks actually bought in to doing energy efficient projects and moving them forward quickly. I do understand the regulatory approach, but usually building owners are going to do the bare minimum, right? They're going to meet it at the bare minimum and that's it. So I see this as a great way of getting everybody involved and pushing towards these energy efficient, renewable type projects more quickly, which is, I think, a great thing for the country, especially if we're going to charge towards, having certain net zero or decarbonization goals in the future.